I'm Dr. John Kruse, and today I'm going to be talking about anger, both what it is at a personal level and the society level, because it's a big problem right now. And hopefully we'll learn a little bit more about what we can do with it and about it. So the take-home message, as usual, is where I'm going to start. Anger is one of the basic emotions. It's triggered by feeling that something is unfair, that one can't do much about it. Right now, again, the world seems to be heaving with anger, so this is critically important for our society. And it's important to be aware that anger is one of the empowering emotions, and that power can be used either for constructive or destructive purposes. So there are ways to learn about what anger is, how it comes about, how it escalates, and how to redirect it. The bottom line is that escalating conflicts, escalating force, meeting anger with anger is seldom a productive way to resolve anything. Step back a little bit and talk more about basic emotions. I know there are a few researchers who don't believe in basic emotions, but I think there's well-established wealth of information establishing the general concepts, even though there may be some quibbles about the nuances or significance of certain things. Even before the internet, humans were bombarded with a flood of information. So out on the savannas where our early ancestors evolved, each blade of grass, its color, its shape, its size, its movement, its scent, its sound was a piece of information. All of that is information, but only some of that information was vital for survival. So our brains, our nervous systems had to evolve ways of how do you sort out the wheat from the chaff? How do you attend to what's important and sort of ignore all the rest until that becomes important? And emotions are a set of systems in our brain for elevating that wheat from the chaff, for registering what's important and what you need to react to. And part of basic emotions is not just an inherent internal feeling state, but each of them has a facial expression that's characteristic. Each of them also contains action tendencies to encourage our bodies to act in different ways. And each of the basic emotions is elicited by a certain template or algorithm in the world that triggers it. So it's not just, we don't get afraid of everything. We get afraid of things that are considered a serious threat to life and limb. Initial emotional reactions are always appropriate. And I would argue that they're always appropriate because we don't have any choice in our initial emotional reaction. Emotions happen faster than conscious thought. They are hardwired. They are shorter circuits. They don't go through as much higher cortical processing. If someone flinches because a ball is thrown at their face, and then it turns out to be a Nerf ball and they can relax, that doesn't really make them stupid or weak because they flinched at something that wasn't a real threat. They had no choice. Their brain perceived it to be a threat before their brain could recorrect and decide it wasn't a threat. There's no situation that's so powerful, so unamenable to any interpretation that only one emotional response is correct. There's always multiple valid ways that someone could frame it or consider it, and that means different emotions can come up because different emotions are going to be triggered by different templates. Anger, again, the template for that, or how it's triggered, is by perceiving something as not fair, that's important, and that we can't do much about it immediately. Someone who comes in for treatment with road rage, it's like, that has nothing to do with fairness. It was just this jerk cut me off, and that's why I'm angry. I'm angry at his behavior. His behavior is bad. But I'd say, well, if you're on the highway, you saw someone driving as stupidly on the other side of the highway. Did you get angry at them? No. Well, why not? Well, it didn't have any impact on me. And if you drill down deep enough, again, anger is always about unfairness. The road rage example is unfair that you're either putting my life at risk by your bad driving or making it likely that I'll be late or might have a crash or distracting me or whatever. But if you drill down enough, you'll find that anger is elicited by unfairness. The facial expressions of anger include flaring of the nostrils and raising the upper lip. And again, across cultures, that's recognized as aspects of anger. It also highlights that one aspect of emotions is that they are social signals, not just internal states. So what's going on in the internal state? When someone's angry, they have heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up, blood flow to the big muscles increases. There is an action tendency, so it doesn't force you to shout. It doesn't make you lean in, but it actually greatly encourages the likelihood you do, that you engage, that you move forward, that you talk louder. Not only the physical aspects, but even within the brain, blood flow is shunted to different areas, and there is less blood flow going to prefrontal cortex thinking areas. So you have less ability and the power of an emotion to think and correct in the moment. The neurologic component of an emotion lasts only fractions of a second. So that means it has to keep being renewed or re-triggered. If someone throws a Nerf ball at you and fear comes up, that fear is only there for a portion of a second until you recalibrate. However, if you're in a dark alley and you're hearing footsteps behind you, your fear lasts more than a fraction of a second because that fear is continually being regenerated or renewed. What's really important and valuable there is knowing that, yes, our initial emotional reaction we may not have much choice over, but once we are aware of it, unless we're in a situation where it's actively being renewed, or we can reassess the situation and decide this emotion isn't appropriate, I will not keep renewing and reactivating this emotion. Most of our particularly negative emotions are emotions that tend to shut people down, make them retreat or pull back. So fear, shame, sadness, all discourage engagement, whereas anger, again, encourages someone to lean in, encourages them to be engaged. That engagement can be either used for constructive reasons or purposes or destructive ones. Often we just condemn all anger as bad and destructive, but if enough people weren't angry, America would still be a colony of Britain. There was enough people angry at taxation without representation. If enough people hadn't been angry about slavery, Black people in this country would still be mostly slaves. If enough people weren't angry about women not being allowed to vote, women still wouldn't be allowed to vote. Enough people weren't angry about DDT poisoning our land or acid rain falling from our skies, we'd still have those major environmental pollutant problems going on. On the other hand, anger can be destructive. So cities can be burned down, property damaged, people get into fights and battles. Most of wars are continued by engaging anger on both sides. So anger can be either constructive or destructive. It depends on how you channel it. Not only, again, are emotions a potent signal to us, to what's important to our environment. Again, part of their very role is conveying, because humans are social animals, telling other people what is going on and telling others what we are feeling at the moment. And for that reason, emotions are very good at eliciting emotions in others. And that doesn't just mean in sympathy or empathy that you're mimicking what's going on. It's often a reaction to. So if I'm feeling sad, that may spawn sadness in you, or it might spawn scorn or derision. Or if I'm feeling joy, it might inspire joy in you. Or, depending on the framing of the situation, you might be sad that I'm happy at a certain thing. You might be angry that I'm happy with something. You might be derisive that I'm happy with that. And if I'm angry, that can be good at, you could be afraid of that. Maybe it make you sad, or again, it might make you scornful, might make you happy. So why is anger so good at eliciting anger, though? And part of that, and this is an important part, is that most of the time we like to think we are behaving well, that we are benign in our intentions, that we're doing good in the world. And if someone suddenly is angry at us, almost always that challenges that basic narrative that we're telling ourselves. Someone else is saying, you're doing bad, you're doing something wrong, you're doing something inappropriate. And a common, it's not the only reaction to that, is to feel that that's unfair. Here I am either minding my own business or doing my own business, which is the right thing to be doing, and you're suddenly telling me it's wrong. So anger is really good at generating more anger. Two other scenarios that I think are important to highlight here, danger anger and the anger danger loops. So danger anger deals with, in human situations, if we make others out to be dangerous to us, large part of our response is often anger in response. So it's not all dangerous. We seldom get angry at the hurricane that's sweeping our neighborhood. We might be angry again at public officials who didn't prepare well enough, or public officials who lied to us and pretended they could change the course of a hurricane by drawing with Sharpies on a map. Danger created by other human beings is often a source of anger because the bottom assumption is that humans should be nice to each other and treat each other well and not endanger each other. Part of why the news media highlights the extent to which other individuals are being dangerous, whether it's accurate or not. By making them dangerous, it's a good way of eliciting anger at their behavior. And anger, danger, the flip side of those two words is, again, that anger is a really powerful destructive force, and it causes danger for societies and individuals if people are angry enough. So separate from the social interaction aspect of emotions, there's also a phenomenon that emotions within us are often very powerful at eliciting secondary or even tertiary emotions. And a lot of this is tied into cultural expectations and sociologic norms. And a lot of this, particularly in modern Western culture, is highly sexist. And I'm going to be talking about many of the concepts of toxic masculinity. So in Western culture, in American culture right now, men are allowed to be proud, they're allowed to be angry, but they're not particularly allowed to be sad or fearful or shameful, or not even actually particularly joyous. Other emotions are considered signs of weakness. On the other hand, women are allowed a broader range. They're allowed to express sadness, they're allowed to feel fear, shame, joy, but not so much anger. If they show anger, they're not powerful, they're bitchy, they're complaining, they're feminazis, they're something else. And even pride is less allocated to women because toxic masculinity culture, it's men who are all powerful, and what should women have any reason to be proud about? So getting into the topic of secondary emotions, if a man feels fear, he may feel ashamed that he is feeling afraid. And then he might even get angry at himself for feeling shame or feeling fear to begin with. And he may usually only be displaying anger, and he may only be aware of anger. So again, reasons he might be angry at his own body for betraying himself and showing any sign of weakness, angry at his self or essence for being a weak individual. He might be angry at others for perceiving signs of weakness in him. All of those lead to a feeling in a state of anger, again, often without any awareness that the original triggering feeling was fear or shame other than the anger. Most of the emotional circuitry, a lot of the circuitry is used for multiple emotions. Most research indicates that we can't experience two emotions at once. We may shift back and forth really quickly between the two. Making some of this a little more concrete and looking at what was happening a few weeks ago and actually is happening on an ongoing basis in LA regarding ICE and deportation. Why would the protesters have any reason to feel angry? Well, they're angry because whether they're immigrants themselves or more supporting the immigrant community, they are aware that untrue statements, sentiments are being expressed about immigrants. Everyone in America is an immigrant, whether your ancestors came over 300, 400 years ago with the Pilgrims, whether you came across the Bering Land Bridge 10, 14, 16,000 years ago, we're all immigrants. So slightly different periods of time on the timescale of even humanity. Currently in America, immigrants are being characterized as criminals when every study I'm aware of has shown that the rates of criminality among immigrants has been lower than the native-born population, not just now, not just 20 years ago, all the way back 150 years ago. The studies show that. Immigrant populations are not, if we were trying to get rid of criminals, we'd deport native-born Americans, not the immigrant community. Most of the immigrants who are in this country are hardworking and productive members of society. It's not fair them to be singled out or taken out of their communities, preventing them from doing the jobs they were doing, preventing them from caring for their family members. It's reasonable that people would feel that that's unfair and be angry about it. There's also very clearly racist connotations and connections to this. Look at who's being picked up. It's based on appearances and pretty clearly brown skin color, looking like you're a Mexican or South American makes you suspect, even if your family has been here generations. What's unfair is that even though there are some blatant untruths here, so many people in the general population seem to tolerate or support this bigotry and these biases. That's not fair. Another level of unfairness is that we live in a country which has in its constitution a right to free assembly, a right to protest, a right to free speech. These individuals are being told that by objecting to what's being done by certain officials, they're behaving wrongly, when again, it's manifestly their right to be able to protest. And compounding that is they're being told that they're hating America. That feels unfair because protest by its very nature, these are not people who are leaving. Leaving would be saying, I hate America so much I can't tolerate it, I'm going elsewhere. Protesting is by its very nature and definition a sign of hope, optimism, positivity. It's saying, this can be made better, and I'm trying to show you how. And yet being told by protesting you're hating is blatantly untrue. It's stupid. It's widely accepted, but it's just wrong. So it should engender anger. Actions of a small fringe of activists are being painted as representative of the whole, and that's not fair, and that's a distortion. Now, some of this is a general media tendency to focus on the extremes. So when LA fires were burning in January of this year, 2025, looking at many news outlets, you would think that the whole city was burning down. It was all in ashes. I don't want to minimize the suffering and horror and the people dead. I know individuals who are in burned out neighborhoods, but even at the height of the fires, the evacuation orders, and everyone in evacuation orders didn't have their house burned down. The evacuation orders at their peak hit 200,000, 180,000 individuals. That's out of a metropolitan area of about 15 to 20 million. That means less than 1% of individuals were threatened directly by fire. But again, the media made it sound that it's whole burning down. So discussion of what's going on in LA, some of the hype of protesters are burning cars everywhere, setting burning buildings on fire. The whole LA is about to be torched. Some of it is just general media focusing on what's bad. But some of it is very intentionally a distortion to increase the feeling of danger and to elicit anger as a response. I mean, if you look even at Fox News, they kept showing the same dozen protesters burning a few Waymo cars. And they acknowledged that there are thousands of protesters. If they had imagery of more widespread damage or destruction, they would have been showing it. They didn't because they can't, because it wasn't there. Let's look at the police and the ICE officials and other government agents and why they might be angry. So one is that their job is to try to keep the peace and try to keep things safe and orderly. And yet they're being attacked while doing that. So that would feel unfair to them, that they're just doing their job. They're doing their job for a public good and they're being attacked for that. Also unfair from their perspective that when they give orders, those aren't being followed. And again, their belief being that their orders are keeping public safety, their professional judgment is being challenged. They're being told that they're making wrong decisions. Some of them, at some level, are feeling shame at their own ineffectiveness, at their own weakness, at their own inability to quell crowds quickly or with just a command rather than having to resort to something more. And again, secondary anger at their own weakness, and guilt. So some of these individuals know that they are targeting innocent people who belong in this country, who have full legal rights in this country. Some of them are aware that our First Amendment rights gives people the right to protest and talk. So some of them are feeling guilt that they know they're attacking the wrong people or treating people in the wrong way. But the inability through toxic masculinity structures to acknowledge, feel, experience their own guilt makes them register anger and work out their anger. In the 1960s, there were numerous what we call race riots in the U.S. Many of them turned bloody and violent on both sides, both some subset of protesters and the police. And a report called the Kerner Commission found that escalation of force generally was not an effective strategy, that meeting anger with anger usually did not work. There's more recent study by Rob Willer and sociologist at Stanford and others that further indicates that escalation of violence, escalation to more violent tactics usually turns off potential allies. So again, not a good strategy for a civil rights movement. The other side of the view, if we are living in a free society, shutting down people's ability to speak or express any opposition is inimical to those rights and is not likely to lead to a positive outcome. A little more about why fighting anger with anger doesn't work. So getting back to numerous studies on parenting, looking at authoritarian parenting styles. So this is being harsh and punitive when kids misbehave. So if you hit your kid for acting out, what are they going to learn? One, they're probably going to learn to hide their behavior and not let you see it. Two, they're going to learn that you hate and devalue them and despise them, and usually, at least at some level, have a negative view of themselves. It's not a way to eradicate bad behavior on the part of kids. It's not productive. And what's different between kids in an authoritarian system and adults is the adults are usually more firmly grounded in the right to protest, the right to behave in different ways is not wrong or bad or a sign they're wrong or bad. So what are some of the other lies supporting anger, confronting anger with anger? So one of the lies is anger, because it's so powerful, is the best emotional tool for dealing with life in general. If all you have is one tool for dealing with things in life, you have a pretty inadequate armamentarium. Yes, anger can be powerful, but that doesn't mean powerful is best. Two is whoever expresses the most anger is the strongest and therefore wins. Three is working in the realm of anger can resolve issues of sadness, shame, or guilt. So again, anger is not even likely to be an effective tool if the underlying issue, if rather than just being angry, is that you're sad about a condition, if you're ashamed of it, if you're feeling guilty. Yes, you can express anger, but that's not going to resolve what's going on because it's fundamentally off target. Another lie is you can only fight fire with fire. So if your opponents are angry, they can only be subdued by firing anger back at them. One other lie is that the only response to anger, you only have two choices. One is anger or one is surrender. And that's also a false dichotomy. There's almost always additional options if you're willing to be thoughtful and creative. So in terms of dealing with anger, DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, focuses for diminishing anger, applies in general to all emotions, that you work against the action tendencies. If you do the opposite or work against what your body is tending to do, that's a pretty powerful way of sort of short-circuiting or dampening down the emotion. General approach is reframing what's going on and seeing if you can look at it a different way. So starting with anger, what's important is to recognize it. So learn how your own body, how your voice change when you're angry. If you can identify and learn to be aware of lower levels of frustration and annoyance before they become volcanic, you have much more ability to intervene at those lower levels and figure out what is it that I feel is unfair? What is it that's making me angry? Part of recognizing is looking at the patterns of what triggers your anger and how your own actions trigger anger. So a very basic cognitive behavioral strategy is if you're working on anger, every time you feel anger, write down what events were going on around you, what your thoughts were before it happened, and usually pretty quickly you will discern a pattern of what seems to be triggering your anger. It's extremely rare that anger is really coming just out of the blue. And if someone's pervasively angry, it's probably not the individual incidents going on. It's probably some perception of a deeper sense of unfairness. And there is certainly unfairness in the world. Final step with recognizing it is to teach your children to recognize anger themselves and use words and not actions to express anger when they're feeling it. So after recognizing it is sit on it. So again, this is a case where you've decided anger is not in your cause. So sitting down, whispering or talking softly are effective ways at becoming less angry. Working against the physical tendency to shout and attack And a reminder that timeouts work as well for adults as they do for children. So if a situation's too hot, too loaded, too anger engendering, just back out and go away and come back later. Number 3, and this is more dealing with anger with others, is listen to it. When confronting anger in others, always listen first. Sometimes just listening is all you need to do. You don't have to necessarily agree, but people want to be heard. Specifically trying to understand what the other person considers to be unfair about the situation and why they are angry can be useful. And if that doesn't get you anywhere, try listening some more, particularly if you're still locked in thinking they're being completely unreasonable. So again, you might not agree with them, but that's different than how unreasonable you think they are. And then particularly listen to why they think that certain facts are the significant ones or the important ones. Most real arguments are about values and priorities, not about the facts. So, we can get into stupid arguments about whether Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio were eating dogs or cats. Researchers have failed to find any incidents of this. It absolutely certainly was not a generalizable problem. But again, even the J.D. Vance in defending why it was perfectly fine to lie about it was that immigrants are a problem. I would argue if you have a good case, you don't need to lie about it to bring attention to your problem, but that's a different matter. If anger seems to be appropriate, again, learn to channel it. So go to protests, go to marches, register to vote, help others to register to vote, lobby your elected officials, write, draw, paint, sing about your anger and share it with others. Donate or volunteer to social justice groups that support the causes you believe in. Invite your children and your friends to help you fight it. And remember that there is a community of other people who share your beliefs, even though those who are in power may want you to feel alone and isolated. You're not. Even in the most red or blue county in this country, there are still numbers of adults who are capable of voting and who voted against that majority. So there are like-minded people in your neighborhood, even if they are few, there are others. Join organizations that are working to change things. Working together helps lighten the load for each individual. Try to step back and see what the bigger picture is. Explore alternatives by finding creative solutions to old problems. Call out injustice when you see it. And I would argue discrimination harms all of us because it devalues our humanity. And remember that meaningful change will take time. So that's all I have to say today. I hope I didn't anger too many people with this. And be healthy, be happy, and be safe.